My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, my parents stood at the head of a banquet table during their 40th wedding anniversary dinner and made an announcement to the 30 guests who'd gathered to celebrate them. "We're taking the whole family to Hawaii next week," my father declared, beaming like he'd just solved world hunger. "Another celebration just for us." The room broke into applause. My sister pressed both hands to her mouth in delight. I smiled too, already feeling the warmth of imagined sunshine, the sound of waves, the smell of salt air. A real vacation. My first in years. Then I asked what should have been the most ordinary question in the world. "What time does our flight leave?" My father's expression shifted the way it does when someone says something that doesn't compute. My mother's smile didn't disappear, it just tightened, like a rubber band pulled one notch too far. And then, in front of every single person in that room, my father said, "You don't need to know the flight time, Claire, you're not coming, someone has to stay home with the kids." 30 pairs of eyes. 30 witnesses to the moment my own family made clear I wasn't quite one of them. But here's what none of them knew: I had a secret, something I'd been quietly building for 3 years. And standing in that room, holding a dirty dessert plate while the chandeliers glowed above me, I decided the time had finally come to use it. To understand why I eventually walked away from everything I'd always known, you have to go back to the beginning. The Morgan family, well, the family I married into by blood, lives in a white colonial house on the quieter side of suburban Boston. 4 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, a lawn so precisely edged it looks painted on. The kind of house that announces success to anyone who happens to drive past. My father, Harold, retired 3 years ago after a long career managing a regional bank branch. My mother, Patricia, has never held a salaried job, though she'll correct you if you imply she doesn't work. She chairs the church women's committee, organizes neighborhood charity drives, and dedicates considerable energy to maintaining what she refers to as the family's standing in the community. Then there's my sister, Danielle, 3 years younger than me, married to a corporate attorney named Derek, whose firm name surfaces in nearly every conversation she has. They have 2 children, Oliver, 5, and Sophie, 3. They also have a brand new Lexus SUV that always occupies the best spot in our parents' driveway. My 10-year-old Honda Civic gets parked on the street. "Claire, move your car before Derek arrives," my mother would say whenever I visited. People notice what's in the driveway. I never argued, I just moved it. That's the quiet tragedy of being the invisible one in a family. You stop recognizing all the small, steady ways they've already decided you're worth less. The better parking spot, the better chair at the dinner table, the way my mother introduces Danielle to strangers using Derek's job title, while I'm simply Claire, she helps out. I work as a part-time accountant. Remote clients, flexible hours, modest income, nothing that impresses anyone at a Dixon dinner table. But I never told them about the other thing, the thing I'd started 3 years ago when my life quietly fell apart. I never told them I had learned in the most unexpected way how to truly see. Let me show you what helping out actually looks like in my family. Thanksgiving, I arrive at 6 in the morning to start the turkey. I set the table with my mother's fine china, the set I'm permitted to wash but never to eat from. I arrange the centerpiece flowers, polish the silverware, and manage the timing of 7 different side dishes across 2 ovens. Danielle arrives at noon in a cashmere sweater, kisses everyone on the cheek, and takes her seat to be served. Christmas follows the same script, with the added task of wrapping all the presents my mother has purchased, since her arthritis won't allow it, though it never seems to interfere with her bridge games 3 times a week. Birthday parties for Oliver and Sophie. I am the coordinator, the decorator, the entertainer, and the cleanup crew, all at once. Last year I spent 8 straight hours running Oliver's dinosaur-themed party while Danielle slipped out for a manicure because she needed some time to herself. The one time I suggested I might need to skip a family gathering due to a client deadline, my mother's voice dropped to the temperature of January. "Family comes first, Claire. We all make sacrifices." Except I was the only one who ever seemed to be making them. The breaking point doesn't arrive in one dramatic moment. It arrives in dozens of small ones. Like the Christmas I unwrapped my gift, a kitchen apron in glittery letters reading "World's Best Aunt." Danielle had given it to me with a wide, satisfied smile, convinced she'd been thoughtful. I wore it. Every single time I came over to cook, clean, and mind the children, I wore it. The realization came on an unremarkable Tuesday evening while I was scrubbing my mother's Le Creuset pot after yet another family dinner. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had invited me somewhere without expecting something from me in return. 3 years ago my world fell apart in a different way. I'd been with a man named Kevin for 4 years. We talked about a future, marriage, children, a life built together. Then one evening he sat across from me and said the words I've never quite been able to unhear. "I love you, Claire, but I'm not in love with you anymore. You're just there, you're always just there. Always just there, like furniture, like something in the background that no one actually looks at." After he left, I found myself wandering into a pawnshop downtown one afternoon. I'm still not entirely sure what I was looking for, maybe just something to hold on to. That's when I noticed it sitting in a glass case near the back, a Canon DSLR camera. Used but clearly cared for, priced at $180. I bought it with money I probably should have saved. I told no one. That camera became my private world. I started photographing the people most others walk straight past, elderly women waiting alone at bus stops, the exhausted faces of overnight cleaning crews, the weathered hands of street vendors packing up at dusk. People society looks right through. The same way my family had always looked right through me. I called the series Invisible Women. I opened an anonymous Instagram account, no face, no real name, only the photographs. Over 3 years, 12,000 people found me. People who noticed what I noticed. People who understood. I kept the camera wrapped in a soft scarf at the very back of my closet. It was the only thing in my life that was entirely, completely mine. 3 weeks before my parents' anniversary dinner, an email arrived in my inbox that I nearly sent straight to the trash. It was from a gallery in Monterey, California, the Coastal Light Gallery, asking whether I might be open to a conversation about my work. I sat staring at that email for 20 minutes before I noticed my hands were trembling, but I didn't reply. Not yet, because good things I had learned did not tend to find their way to people like me. There is one person in my family who has always actually seen me. Her name is Ruth, my mother's younger sister. Aunt Ruth is what my mother refers to with barely disguised disapproval as the family's cautionary tale. She never married. She chose ceramics over convention. 20 years ago she packed up and moved to Carmel by the Sea, where she opened a small cafe with a pottery studio tucked in the back. My mother has never quite forgiven her for it. Ruth threw away everything she could have had, she says, with the particular sorrow of someone who cannot imagine choosing joy over respectability. I have been calling Aunt Ruth every Sunday evening for 7 years. My mother doesn't know. It was Ruth who first saw my photographs. I'd sent her one, just one, barely daring to, and her response made me pull over to the side of the road because I couldn't see through the tears. "Claire, this is extraordinary. You have a real gift. No one had ever said that to me about anything." She was the one who pushed me to keep shooting, keep posting. And she was the one who, 3 weeks before the anniversary party, said something that rearranged everything inside me. "Claire, I hope you don't mind, I passed your Instagram along to someone, a gallery owner I know down in Monterey. His name is Marcus Coleman, he's looking for emerging artists." I nearly dropped my phone. "Aunt Ruth, that's the gallery that emailed me." "I know, sweetheart, he told me he wants to speak with you about a solo show." Silence, my pulse loud in my ears. "But that's a real thing. That's an actual career." "Yes," she said, quiet and certain. "It is, and you deserve it. You don't need anyone's permission to go after what you love. I learned that lesson far too late. You don't have to." That night I wrote back to Marcus Coleman. "Now let me bring you to the evening that changed everything." My parents' 40th anniversary. A milestone my mother had decided, worthy of nothing less than 30 guests, a partially catered menu, partially, because I would assist to reduce costs, and a full evening of celebrating 4 decades of what appeared from the outside to be a perfect marriage. Preparations began a week in advance. I took 3 days off from my accounting clients. I sourced white roses and peonies per my mother's exact specifications. I hand-lettered 60 place cards in the calligraphy she required. I liaised with the caterer, ironed every tablecloth, and polished the Waterford crystal glasses that had been wedding gifts 40 years ago. The morning of the party I arrived at 7, still in jeans and a t-shirt, because there was no point dressing before 10 hours in a kitchen. By 6 in the evening the house looked immaculate. Candles on every surface. The dining table extended the full length of the room, set for 30 with my mother's finest china. I changed into a simple black dress, nothing designed to draw attention, nothing that said anything other than "I'm here and I'm quiet about it." "Claire," my mother caught me in the hallway, her eyes moving over me the way a quality control inspector surveys a product. "Is that what you've chosen to wear? It's black, I thought it was appropriate." "It'll do, I suppose, just stay out of the way this evening. Tonight is about your father and me." I nodded, I always nodded. Guests arrived at 7, men in blazers, women in cocktail dresses, decades of colleagues and church friends and neighbours who had been carefully selected for their ability to reflect well on the Dixon name. 30 people who believed they understood this family completely. None of them truly knew me at all. In 3 hours, that would stop mattering. Danielle made her entrance at 7:15, timed, whether consciously or not, for maximum effect. She swept through the front door in a red wrap dress, announcing the designer to anyone within earshot, with Derek behind her in a charcoal suit and both children dressed like they'd stepped out of a clothing catalogue. My mother crossed the room to embrace her, exclaiming over how beautiful she looked, how distinguished Derek appeared, how precious the grandchildren were. I watched from the kitchen doorway holding a platter of bruschetta. "Everyone, you remember my daughter Danielle and her husband Derek," my mother announced to the room. "Derek just made partner at Whitmore and Associates. We couldn't be prouder." Warm applause, bright smiles. No one mentioned that I had been doing Derek's taxes for 3 years, free of charge, as a matter of course. I circulated through the party with appetizers, refilled wine glasses, answered questions from guests who didn't recognize me. "Are you with the catering staff?" one woman asked, reaching for a crab cake. Before I could answer, my mother appeared at my elbow. "Oh, that's Claire, my other daughter. She's helping out this evening." The woman smiled pleasantly and turned away. My mother drifted on without noticing. She never noticed. At some point, Derek appeared with Sophie balanced on his hip and Oliver pulling at his sleeve. "Can you take them? Danielle and I need to circulate." "Not would you mind, not thank you. Just can you take them, the way you'd ask someone to hold your coat." I took them. I fed them dinner in the kitchen. I dabbed juice from Sophie's dress. I told Oliver 3 stories in a row to keep him from charging into the living room. When I finally emerged, dessert was already being served. I had not eaten anything since that morning. No one had thought to set aside a plate. The announcement came at 9, just after the tiramisu. My father rose and tapped his champagne glass, and 30 faces turned toward him with warm, expectant smiles. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke of 40 years and what they meant, his voice carrying the rehearsed warmth of a man who has given many toasts. My mother glowed. Danielle reached for Derek's hand. I stood near the kitchen door, still holding a dirty dessert plate. "And to mark this occasion properly," my father continued, pausing for effect, "Patricia and I have a little surprise." He smiled. My mother's eyes caught the candlelight. "Next week we're taking the whole family to Hawaii, 1 week at the Four Seasons in Maui. A second celebration, just the Morgans." The room exhaled in collective delight. "How wonderful, what a lovely thing to do, you both deserve it." Danielle actually gasped, reaching for my father's arm. Something loosened in my chest. The whole family, that meant me. For once I wouldn't be the one behind the scenes. I would simply be there, sitting in the sun, belonging. I took 1 small step forward and let myself smile. "That sounds incredible. What time is our flight?" The question landed and sat there. My father's expression changed. He glanced at my mother. Something moved between them, a look I had seen exchanged 1,000 times across 1,000 tables, and had never, until that precise moment, fully understood. "Claire," he said slowly, "you don't need the flight information." The room went still. Not the anticipatory silence of a celebration, but something tighter, colder. "I don't understand," I said, hearing my own voice as though from a distance. My father cleared his throat. "Because you're not going." 30 pairs of eyes. "Someone needs to stay back," my mother added, in the tone she uses when she considers something self-evident. "Danielle and Derek need a proper holiday. That means you'll look after the children." "But Claire," her voice sharpened, "you don't have anything pressing. Danielle works hard, she deserves a rest." Danielle works hard. Danielle, who had not held a job since Oliver was born. Danielle, who had a nanny 3 days a week and still described herself as utterly depleted. "It's only a week," Derek added, not quite meeting my eyes. "The kids adore you." I stood there in my plain black dress, holding a dirty plate, while 30 people watched my family excuse me from my own family's vacation. A few looked uncomfortable. Most looked away. One woman leaned close to her husband and murmured something behind her hand. I caught 2 words, "poor thing." The champagne glass shook in my grip. I set down the plate. I set down the glass. I could not trust my hands. "Of course," I said, in the steady, accommodating voice I had been perfecting for 32 years. "I completely understand." I smiled the smile of someone who has learned that smiling costs less than the alternative. But something had shifted in me, not broken, not yet, but cracked. The way the ground cracks before everything underneath it finally moves. I excused myself to the kitchen, leaned against the counter in the dark, and closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I began making a plan that had nothing to do with anyone else's comfort. The party carried on without me, naturally. I stood at the sink washing dishes while laughter spilled in through the walls. After a while, Danielle appeared in the doorway, her red dress catching the light, her expression arranged into something that was meant to look like sympathy. "Don't be upset, Claire," she said, touching my arm lightly. "You know how it is. Derek and I genuinely need this time. It's been such a hard stretch with the kids." I kept washing. "I understand. Besides, you're so wonderful with Oliver and Sophie, they'll barely even notice we're gone." I rinsed a champagne flute, set it in the rack, said nothing. Danielle sighed, the particular sigh she reserves for when she thinks I'm being difficult. "Look, it's a week. And you don't have a boyfriend or anything keeping you. Your schedule is flexible." Flexible, as if my time held no worth simply because I had the freedom to spend it. "Derek made a list," Danielle continued, already unlocking her phone. "Their routines, food allergies, all of it. Sophie can't have strawberries, you remember that, right? And Oliver's been having trouble with one of his ears. He might need drops. I'll send you everything." She didn't ask whether I was willing. She simply assumed. Then Derek appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. "All sorted?" he asked Danielle. "Great, we're heading out early tomorrow to pack. Your mother wants family photos before we go." They were gone before I had a chance to respond. Not that I would have, not that I ever did. But as I stood alone in my mother's kitchen, staring at the list of instructions Danielle had just sent to my phone, one thought settled in my chest with the quiet weight of something finally understood. They don't see me as family, they see me as staff, and staff can resign. It was nearly midnight when I found the emails. The last guests had gone home. My parents had retreated to bed, worn out from accepting 40 years' worth of congratulations. I was alone in the living room folding tablecloths when I remembered a client file I needed to send, a deadline I'd postponed for this party. My laptop was at home. My mother's sat open on the kitchen counter. She won't mind, I told myself. She'd borrowed my things without asking more times than I could count. I opened it. Safari was already running. And there it was, my mother's Gmail, still logged in, a recent thread glowing at the top of the inbox. Subject line: Hawaii arrangements, Claire situation. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew whatever was inside would hurt. I clicked anyway. The thread ran between my mother and Danielle, dating back a week before the party. From Patricia to Danielle: "Keep Claire here to watch the kids. She doesn't have anything important going on anyway." Derek was right, it's like having free help. She should be grateful we give her something to do. And Danielle's reply: "Totally agree, Mom. She'll probably feel useful for once. Kind of sad, honestly, but at least it works out for us." I read those words 3 times to make sure I understood them. Free help, she should be grateful, kind of sad. I took screenshots. I forwarded them to my own email. I deleted the sent message from my mother's outbox and cleared the browser history. Then I sat in my mother's dark kitchen in the house where I had grown up and finally allowed myself to understand, without any softening or excuse, exactly what I was to these people. I drove home at 1 in the morning through empty streets. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom in a building that hadn't been touched since the 90s. Beige carpet, white walls, second-hand furniture. My mother had called it depressing the one time she'd visited. But it was mine. The only place I could breathe without permission. I sat in the darkness for a long while, staring at my phone. Marcus Coleman's email glowed on the screen. We'd exchanged a few messages already. He wanted to see my full portfolio in person, was genuinely excited about the series. I could go, I could actually go. I picked up my phone and called the only person I knew would understand. Aunt Ruth answered on the second ring. Even past midnight, she answered. "Claire, what's wrong?" I told her everything, the announcement, the humiliation, the emails. My voice cracked exactly once when I read the words "free help" out loud. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then Aunt Ruth said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Claire, I have a spare room above the cafe. I need help with the morning shift anyway. And that gallery, 20 minutes from my front door." "Aunt Ruth, I can't just..." "Yes, you can leave. You can choose yourself for once in your life. The only thing standing between you and that is you." I hung up at 2 in the morning. By 6 I was packing. 3 suitcases, my camera equipment, my laptop, the soft cashmere scarf that had kept my Canon safe for 3 years. I left behind the world's best aunt apron. For the first time in 32 years, I was choosing myself. Let me tell you what happened when I told them I was leaving. 2 days before the Hawaii trip, I drove to my parents' house one final time. My mother was in the living room coordinating the family's vacation wardrobe. Danielle sat on the couch scrolling through resort reviews. Derek was somewhere upstairs, likely on a work call. My father occupied his armchair with the newspaper, present in body as always, absent in every other way. "I need to say something," I said from the doorway. My mother barely glanced up. "If it's about the children's schedule, Danielle already sent it to you." "It's not about that," I steadied my voice. "I won't be watching the kids, I won't be available." "That got them?" Danielle's head came up sharply. My mother's hands froze over a folded sundress. "What do you mean, not available?" my mother asked. "I have a professional opportunity in California. I'm leaving tomorrow." "California?" My father lowered his paper. "What kind of opportunity?" "Something I've been working toward for some time." I didn't owe them the details. I didn't owe them anything. Danielle's expression twisted. "Claire, you can't be serious. I'm counting on you. We all planned around this." "You planned around me without asking me," I said quietly. "I'm not cancelling my life because you assumed I didn't have one." The silence that followed was the kind that fills every corner of a room. Then my mother stood up, her voice dropping to something cold and deliberate. "This is incredibly selfish. Danielle needs your help. Family comes first." "Family comes first," I repeated, except when it came to inviting me to Hawaii. Her mouth opened, nothing came out. For once, Patricia had no answer ready. My father cleared his throat. "If you walk out that door, don't expect a warm welcome when you come back." "I understand," I said. And for the first time in my life, I genuinely meant it. The next 24 hours were a study in emotional pressure. My mother called 6 times, each voicemail escalating beyond the last. "You're tearing this family apart, Claire. I hope you can live with that. Your father barely touched his dinner. Danielle cried all evening. The children keep asking where you've gone." Danielle took a different approach, weaponized vulnerability, soft-voiced and wounded. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I'm your sister. Don't you care about us at all?" And then the text that nearly stopped me cold. "You're going to end up alone, you know, just like Aunt Ruth. Is that what you want?" I stared at those words for a long time, just like Aunt Ruth. They meant it as a warning. They meant it to frighten me back into line. But Aunt Ruth had her own business, her own art, a life built entirely on her own terms in a town she loved, doing work that made her soul full. Aunt Ruth was happy. Maybe ending up like Aunt Ruth wasn't a threat at all. Maybe it was a promise. I turned off my phone. The last thing I did before leaving Boston was walk through my empty apartment one final time. 3 suitcases by the door. Everything else stayed behind, the second-hand couch, the beige carpet, the life I'd been living for everyone else. I taped my spare key inside an envelope and slid it under my landlord's door. Month-to-month lease paid through the end of January. A clean break. I loaded my car as the sun came up. My 10-year-old Honda Civic, the same car my mother had spent years being quietly embarrassed by, was going to carry me into a new life. I didn't look back when I pulled away from the curb. The drive from Boston to Carmel by the Sea takes roughly 45 hours if you're in a hurry. I wasn't. I took 5 days. Roadside motels, diner breakfasts, the particular freedom of eating alone without anyone needing something from me. Somewhere in Nebraska, I pulled over at a rest stop and sat watching the sunset pour gold and pink across the open prairie. I lifted my camera and took the shot. My first photograph as a free woman. On the 3rd day, my phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. I turned it back on briefly for directions. "Mom says if you're not home when we get back from Hawaii, you're dead to her." I read it once, then deleted it. She'd been treating me like I was already dead. At least now I'd be alive somewhere else. On the 4th day, I called Aunt Ruth from a gas station in Arizona. "I'm about 8 hours out," I said. "Your room is ready," she told me. "Fresh sheets, ocean view, and Marcus wants to meet you tomorrow afternoon if you're feeling up to it." My stomach turned over. "Tomorrow? That's so soon." "Claire," her voice was warm and certain. "You've been waiting 3 years for this. It's not soon, it's finally." When I crossed into California, something inside me shifted, quietly, permanently, like a door easing open after years stuck in its frame. The Pacific appeared on my left, vast and blue and indifferent to everything that had happened to me. I rolled down the window and breathed salt air for the first time in my life. I cried then, not from sadness, from relief, from the terrifying, overwhelming sensation of possibility. At 7 in the evening on the 5th day, I turned into the driveway of the Ceramic Cup, Aunt Ruth's cafe and pottery studio in Carmel by the Sea. She was standing on the porch, arms already open. "Welcome home," she said. And for the first time in 32 years, somewhere actually felt like it. Carmel by the Sea doesn't feel real at first. cottages with storybook rooflines, art galleries tucked between cypress trees, ocean mist drifting through the streets at dusk. The whole town feels like something a painter dreamed up on a quiet afternoon. Aunt Ruth's cafe sat 2 blocks from the beach, hand-lettered sign, blue shutters, window boxes spilling over with lavender. The pottery studio occupied the back half of the building, where she taught classes and sold her work to visitors who wandered in for coffee and stayed an hour longer than they'd planned. My room was upstairs, small but full of light. A white quilt, a wooden desk, and a view of the Pacific that made something ache in my chest in the best possible way. "You'll do the morning shift," Aunt Ruth explained over dinner that first night. 6 to noon, after that your time is yours. "I don't know how to thank you." She waved her hand. "Don't thank me, build something, that's payment enough." The next morning I was up before dawn. I tied on a canvas apron, a simple one, embroidered with the ceramic cup in blue thread, nothing glittery, nothing ironic, and learned to make pour-over coffee. Customers came and went, locals who called Ruth by name, tourists charmed by the handmade scones, people who had no idea the woman taking their order had fled her entire life less than a week ago. By noon I'd earned $37 in tips and smiled more than I had in months. At 2 o'clock I had an appointment at Coastal Light Gallery. I showered, changed into the nicest dress I owned, and walked 3 blocks to meet the man who might change everything. Marcus Coleman looked nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured someone polished and intimidating, the kind of gallery owner who makes artists feel like they've interrupted something important. Instead, the man who greeted me was tall and silver-haired, with weathered hands and warm eyes. He wore a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up and smiled like he'd been expecting me for years. "Claire Morgan," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Ruth has told me a great deal about you, but the work speaks entirely for itself." He led me through the gallery, white walls, natural light, photographs and paintings arranged with quiet care. This was a serious place, a place where art was treated like it mattered. "I've spent a good deal of time with your Instagram," Marcus said, pausing in front of a large monitor displaying my portfolio. "The Invisible Women series is extraordinary. There's a truth in those images that most photographers spend decades chasing." He stopped at one photograph in particular, an elderly woman at a bus stop, her face a landscape of patience and quiet dignity. "This is the one that made me reach out. There's something in her eyes, resignation maybe, or endurance. It's heartbreaking." "She'd been standing there 40 minutes, I said quietly. "The bus was late. Nobody stopped to ask if she needed anything." Marcus turned to look at me. "You don't just take pictures, Claire, you see people, truly see them, that's a rare thing." He paused. "I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition, 15 pieces opening in 6 weeks. We cover printing, framing and all marketing costs. You keep 60% of every sale." I signed the contract on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting at Marcus's desk while sunlight moved across the gallery floor. 15 photographs, opening night in late August. The gallery would handle everything: production, installation, promotion. I would receive 60% of all sales revenue. Standard terms, Marcus assured me. Fair ones. But as I read through the pages, my hands began to shake. It wasn't the business terms that undid me. It was my name, printed in clean official type. Artist, Claire Morgan. A legal document declaring that my work had value, that I had value. I thought about all the returns I'd filed without credit, all the parties I'd built without thanks, all the hours spent caring for children who would grow up never knowing how much of myself I'd given them. Not once had my name appeared on anything that recognized my contribution. Until now. "The exhibition title," Marcus said, pointing to a line near the bottom. "I'd like your input. We're proposing Invisible Women, Portraits of the Overlooked." I whispered it back to myself, Invisible Women. "It's perfect." I signed my name, Marcus countersigned. His assistant notarized the pages with a crisp official stamp. When it was done, he handed me my copy. "Congratulations, Claire, you are officially a represented artist." I walked out of that gallery holding the contract against my chest like something precious and fragile. Physical proof that I wasn't nothing, that I had never been nothing. For 3 years I had built something entirely in the dark. Now at last it was about to step into the light. While I was building my new life in California, my family was quietly discovering what my absence actually cost them. I didn't see any of it firsthand. I pieced it together later from voicemails, texts, and one deeply uncomfortable phone call from my father. Hawaii apparently was a disaster. Without me there to manage the children, Danielle and Derek couldn't enjoy a single adults-only dinner. Oliver had a meltdown on the beach because nobody had packed his special sandcastle bucket, something I always remembered. Sophie developed an ear infection on day 3 and nobody could find the pediatrician's number because I'd always been the one who kept track of those things. My mother spent most of the trip lodging complaints, calling the concierge repeatedly about the turned-on service, sending back her cocktail twice, announcing to anyone nearby that this was not at all relaxing. My father, wisely, did not point out that she had planned the trip herself. The texts started arriving on day 4. Claire, where are the kids' medical records? Claire, what's Oliver's bedtime routine? He won't go down. Claire, the restaurant doesn't have a children's menu, what do they eat? I didn't respond. I was too busy selecting prints at a photography lab in Monterey, choosing frames, and meeting with a journalist from Carmel magazine who wanted to write about my work. But here's what absence does that argument never can: it shows people exactly what they've been taking for granted. On the 6th day of the Hawaii trip, Danielle did something she had never done before. She typed my name into a search engine, and for the first time she found something other than a blank page. 6 weeks later, I stood in the center of Coastal Light Gallery and could not quite believe what I was looking at. 15 of my photographs covered the walls, each one printed large and framed in simple black. The space glowed with soft, warm light. A string quartet played in the corner, Marcus's idea, not mine. A bartender in a crisp white shirt poured champagne. 50 guests moved through the room, local artists I'd met through Aunt Ruth, collectors Marcus had cultivated over years, a journalist from Carmel magazine already making notes. People who had come specifically, deliberately, to see my work. My work on gallery walls, with price tags that made the room tilt slightly every time I looked at them. I wore a navy dress, simple, nothing that demanded attention. My hair was down for once. I'd put on lipstick, a small act of claiming space that felt larger than it should have. Aunt Ruth appeared at my side and pressed a glass of champagne into my hand. How are you feeling? Terrified, I admitted. What if no one buys anything? Someone already has. She tilted her head toward a woman in pearls standing before the centerpiece of the show, the bus stop photograph, the one that had caught Marcus's attention first. A small red dot had appeared beside the placard. That's Mrs. Petton. She owns more art in Monterey County than most museums. She just bought that piece for $3,000. $3,000 for something I had made. Marcus appeared at my elbow, grinning. I want to introduce you to someone from the magazine. They're discussing you for next month's cover feature. Cover feature, my face, my name, my story in print. I was halfway through that introduction when the gallery door opened, and the floor shifted beneath me. Danielle and Derek walked in, still sun-flushed from Hawaii, looking completely out of place. Danielle wore a floral sundress better suited to a poolside brunch. Derek had his phone out before he'd fully crossed the threshold. They both scanned the room with the expression I knew well, the look my family wore when they encountered something they couldn't immediately categorize. Then Danielle saw me. Claire, she rushed forward, arms wide, as though we were reuniting after a long and anxious separation. Oh my God, we've been so worried about you. 50 guests turned to look. The string quartet dipped imperceptibly before recovering. Danielle, I kept my voice steady. This is unexpected. We had to come. Her eyes were wide and earnest. We flew in yesterday. Mom found your Instagram. She's been calling everyone trying to track you down. Derek appeared behind her, nodding at me the way he nods at opposing counsel. Wendy, nice place. It's a gallery, I said. My gallery opening, actually. Danielle blinked, taking in the photographs for the first time. The guests, the champagne, the red dots beginning to accumulate beside the placards. You did all of this. Her voice was genuinely bewildered. Since when do you do this? Since 3 years ago. You never asked what I did with my time. Aunt Ruth materialized quietly at my side. Across the room, Marcus was watching, ready. Danielle leaned closer and lowered her voice. Claire, I have news. I'm pregnant, number 3. Her eyes searched my face. I really need you to come home. Derek's hours are relentless right now. Mom's useless with the kids. I need you. There it was, not congratulations on your exhibition, not an apology, just need. Always, always their need. I need you. How many times had those 3 words rearranged my life? How many times had I folded myself smaller to fit into the space they'd carved out for me? Danielle, I said quietly, I'm in the middle of my opening night. I know, and this is lovely, really. She waved her hand at 15 months of my soul hanging on the walls like it was a pleasant hobby. But we can talk about all that later. Right now I need to know when you're coming back. She's not coming back. Aunt Ruth's voice cut clean through the room. She lives here now. Derek stepped forward, irritation flickering across his face. With all due respect, Ruth, this is a family matter. Family matter? Aunt Ruth let out a short, sharp laugh. You mean the family that uninvited her from vacation and called her free help in emails she was never supposed to read? Danielle went the color of chalk. Around us, the guests had stopped pretending not to listen. We didn't mean it like that, Danielle started. How exactly did you mean it? The voice came from Mrs. Petton, who stood nearby with her champagne glass, watching the scene with complete composure. I'm sorry, Derek said tightly, and you are? Someone who just paid $3,000 for that young woman's art. She nodded toward the bus stop photograph. And someone who's quite curious why her own family seems to think she should walk away from her career to be a babysitter. The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly. Danielle turned to me, desperation pooling in her eyes. Claire, please, can we just talk somewhere private? For 32 years I had made myself small. I had whispered, accommodated, disappeared. Not tonight. I stepped forward into the center of my own exhibition and spoke clearly enough for the room to hear. Danielle, I understand that you're pregnant. Congratulations, genuinely. But I won't be returning to Boston to serve as your childcare. Claire, I'm not finished. My voice didn't waver. You can hire a nanny. Derek earns enough at Whitmore and Associates and you have never had any trouble spending money. What you cannot do is hire me because I was never paid to begin with. Danielle's mouth opened and closed. This isn't a hobby, I gestured at the walls around me. This is my work. I have been building this for 3 years while every person in our family assumed I had nothing important to do. And just so we're clear, I pointed to the photograph Mrs. Petton had purchased, its small red dot bright against the white wall. That piece sold for $3,000 tonight. I've sold 4 pieces totaling $8,000. My work has value, I have value. And I will not walk away from that to go back to being free help. Silence, complete, absolute silence. Derek coughed, Danielle's eyes filled with tears, real ones I thought, not the practiced kind. Then Marcus began to clap. Aunt Ruth joined him. Mrs. Petton raised her champagne glass in a quiet toast. One by one, the rest of the room followed. Applause moved through the gallery like a wave, not for my photographs for this moment. For the moment I finally stood in my own space and said enough. I didn't smile triumphantly, I didn't perform victory. I simply looked at my sister and said, I hope your pregnancy goes well, I mean that. Then I turned and walked away. 20 minutes later, the gallery door opened again. I was in the middle of a conversation with the journalist when I saw them. My parents standing in the entrance, looking as though they'd arrived from a different world entirely. My mother wore her Burberry trench coat, reserved for occasions that required her full authority. My father stood slightly behind her in a blazer, looking uncomfortable in ways I'd never seen before. Their eyes swept the room until they found me. My mother moved through the gallery, the way she moves through every room, as though it already belongs to her. Claire, the same tone she'd used when I was 8 and had tracked mud through the house. We need to talk. The journalist raised an eyebrow. I excused myself and crossed the room to meet them before the situation could escalate. You came all this way, I said. Of course we did. You disappeared. You left your family when we needed you most. My mother's voice trembled with the specific righteousness of someone who has never once considered they might be wrong. And now, I find you here playing at being an artist while your sister is pregnant and struggling. Danielle is pregnant and financially comfortable, I said. She's not struggling, she's inconvenienced. Don't be cruel. That isn't cruelty, Mom, that's accuracy. I took a slow breath. You're right that this isn't the version of me you're used to, the one you could count on to do whatever you needed without complaint. But that Claire was never truly seen, she was just used. My father cleared his throat. Wendy, your mother is only trying to say. I know what she's trying to say, Dad, I've been hearing it my whole life. Family comes first, make sacrifices, don't be selfish. I looked at him steadily. But I wasn't included in the family trip to Hawaii, so which is it, am I family or aren't I? Neither of them had an answer for that. My mother recovered first. Hawaii was one trip, you're making something enormous out of nothing. Someone had to stay with the children. Someone, I repeated. Why always me? Why is it always me? Because you have the time, she said. You don't have a husband, you don't have children of your own. What else would you possibly be doing? I had wondered, during all the miles between Boston and California, whether I would ever use those screenshots. Part of me had hoped I'd never need to. But standing in my gallery, surrounded by my work in a room full of witnesses, I understood that some truths need to be spoken clearly. I took out my phone. Let me read you something, I said. This is an email you sent to Danielle before the anniversary party. My mother's face went white. Keep Claire here to watch the kids. She doesn't have anything important to do anyway. It's like having free help. She should be grateful we give her something to do. I lowered the phone slightly. And Danielle's reply, she'll probably feel useful for once. Kind of sad, honestly, but at least it works out for us. Danielle, standing a few feet away, looked as though she wanted the floor to dissolve beneath her. Claire, where did you? My father started. It doesn't matter where I found it. What matters is that you wrote it. I put the phone away. I'm not reading this to humiliate anyone. I'm reading it so you understand why I left. You didn't see me as family. You saw me as staff, and staff has the right to resign. My mother's mouth opened and closed and opened again. For the first time in my living memory, Patricia Morgan had nothing to say. It was Derek who finally snapped. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing. Your family asked you to babysit, that's what families do. Not everyone gets to run off and call themselves an artist. Pretend to be an artist. Mrs. Petton's voice crossed the room like a blade. Derek turned. With respect, ma'am, you don't know this family. This is a private matter. I know exactly what I need to know. She set down her champagne glass. I know that young woman has spent years photographing the people society overlooks, and I know her own family treated her in precisely the same way. A murmur moved through the room. Guests were openly watching now, the kind of scene my mother had always feared in every setting except the ones she controlled. This is a misunderstanding, my mother said, rallying. Family conversations are being taken entirely out of context. A joke, a woman across the room, silver-haired, someone who'd bought a piece from me earlier in the evening, spoke up quietly. Telling your daughter she has nothing important to do, calling her free help. What part of that is funny? Maury murmurs. The social capital my mother had spent decades building was dissolving in real time, in a gallery 2,000 miles from home. I think, Aunt Ruth said gently, it might be time for you to go. My mother's face burned scarlet. My father took her arm without a word. Danielle was crying, truly crying now, arms wrapped around herself. Derek stood motionless, his courtroom composure finally spent, apparently realizing there was no argument to make here that wouldn't make things worse. Claire, my mother said, her voice shaking, you'll regret this. No, I said quietly, I really won't. She left first, turning on her heel and pulling my father behind her. The gallery door closed with a soft click that somehow echoed louder than any slam could have. Danielle lingered, mascara tracked down her cheeks. She looked, for the first time I could remember, like she didn't know what came next. Claire, she said, her voice cracked and small. I didn't know you felt this way, I thought you liked helping. No, you didn't, I said without cruelty. You didn't think about it at all, none of you did. Derek placed a hand on her shoulder. For once he stayed quiet. Maybe he'd finally run out of things to say. I hope your pregnancy is healthy, I said. I hope your children are happy, but I won't be their on-call aunt anymore. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be different. It has to be equal. Danielle nodded, tears still falling. I understand. I wasn't certain she did, but it wasn't my responsibility to make her understand anymore. They left through the same door my parents had used. The gallery released a long, collective breath. Aunt Ruth wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You okay? I think so. I let out a shaky, disbelieving laugh. I just confronted my entire family in public at my own art show. You did, and you were magnificent. Marcus appeared with a fresh glass of champagne. I've been running galleries for 20 years. I have never seen an opening night quite like this one. Is that good or bad? He smiled. Let's just say that everyone here tonight will remember your name, and for an artist, Claire, that's everything. I looked around at my photographs, my gallery, my new life. For once in 32 years, I didn't feel invisible. By the time the gallery closed, I had sold 8 of 15 photographs, 8 pieces, $14,000 in total sales. 8,400 would come to me, 60%, exactly as the contract promised. Marcus handed me the evening's transaction summary as the last guest drifted out. "Not a bad opening night," he said, "especially for one with unexpected theatrical elements." I stared at the numbers until they stopped feeling unreal. "Mrs. Petton also wants to commission a piece," Marcus continued. "She has a property in Big Sur. She'd like you to photograph the coastline. Private collectors do this. She liked your perspective. She wants to see what you bring to her landscape." He passed me a business card. "Her assistant's contact, reach out next week." He paused. "And the magazine journalist Susan said she has more than enough for a feature. They're considering you for the cover." Cover of an actual magazine. My name, my face, my story in print. Aunt Ruth helped me carry the 7 unsold pieces back to my room above the cafe that night. 7 was better than 15. 7 meant people had seen something worth owning in what I'd made. I set the check on my desk and photographed it, not to post anywhere, just to remember. Payable to Claire Morgan. $8,400. Proof that I wasn't nothing, that I had never been nothing at all. 2 months later, my new life had settled into a rhythm I recognized as happiness. I woke at 5, watched the Pacific light up from my window, and opened the ceramic cup by 6. Morning shift until noon. Coffee, conversation, the slow, comfortable work of learning the names of people who now recognized me as Ruth's niece, the photographer. Afternoons belonged entirely to my work. I'd rented a small studio space 3 blocks from the cafe, just enough room for my editing equipment and a printing station. The first exhibition had closed, but Marcus had already scheduled another for spring. A new series, Boundaries, photographs of edges and thresholds, the spaces between belonging and being outside, between love and obligation, between who you were told to be and who you actually are. It felt exactly right. The magazine article ran in October. My face on the cover of Carmel magazine beside the headline, "The Artist Who Learned to See Herself." The article told my story, names softened, details shaped for a general audience, but the truth was there. The invisibility, the breaking point, the choice. Messages began arriving in my inbox from women across the country, the family helpers, the reliable ones, the ones everyone forgot to thank. I thought I was the only one. "You gave me permission to leave. Thank you for showing me it's possible." My family reached out eventually. Danielle texted when the baby arrived, a girl named Charlotte. She sent a photo. I sent congratulations and a gift card, nothing more. My mother called once. I let it go to voicemail. She asked whether I'd gotten this out of my system yet. I deleted it. But my father surprised me. His email arrived on a Tuesday evening, 3 sentences exactly. "Claire, I saw the magazine. I'm proud of you. That one I kept. Today I'm sitting in my studio, looking out at the Pacific. The Canon camera I bought from that pawn shop years ago still sits on my shelf, older now, well worn, a few new scratches but still working. Next to it sits a newer model, purchased with money I earned from my art. Both of them matter. One taught me to see, the other is proof that people saw me back." My second exhibition opens next month. Boundaries. 15 new photographs, each one exploring the edges of connection, where family ends and self begins, where obligation becomes exploitation, where love quietly turns into something else entirely. I think it might be the best work I've ever made. Aunt Ruth stops by every morning with coffee and her characteristically direct commentary. Marcus checks in weekly with news about collectors and new opportunities. The regulars at the ceramic cup have started requesting the table by the window, where I sometimes edit photos between customers. What they've taken to calling, warmly, the photographer's table. I'm not wealthy, I'm not famous, but I am seen, and that is enough. As for my family, we exist now in a new configuration. Christmas cards, birthday texts, occasional updates about the children. Civil, distant, healthier than before. I haven't been back to Boston. Maybe someday I will, but only ever as a visitor, never again as the help. The other day I came across an old photograph while sorting through a hard drive, a self-portrait taken years ago in the mirror of my Boston apartment, back when I was still invisible. The woman looking back at me in that image appeared exhausted, defeated, like someone waiting for permission to exist. I deleted it. That woman is gone. In her place is someone who takes up space. Someone who makes beautiful things, who says no when she means no and yes only when she chooses. Someone who finally, after 32 long years, let herself be seen. That's the real story, not revenge, not triumph, just freedom. From a psychological perspective, Claire's story reflects what clinicians call parentification, when one child, often the eldest, is assigned adult responsibilities without recognition or reciprocity. She also occupied what family systems therapists describe as the scapegoat role, the member whose needs are consistently deprioritized, while a golden child receives disproportionate attention and resources. Here's what I want you to carry with you. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. It is not abandonment. It is the recognition that you cannot pour from an empty vessel and that the people who truly love you will not ask you to keep trying. If you find yourself in a situation like Claire's, remember, your worth is not measured by your usefulness to others. It was never measured that way. It was always there. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight, it's to walk away, to build something of your own, to let your life speak louder than any argument ever could. You deserve that, we all do.